All right, hi everyone, welcome to the skill session. We have an awesome presentation done by Mike, who is right on the call with us, on Halloween's themes and screams. So he's going to tell us all about the history of Halloween and how it relates to theme parks and everything like that. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email TEANG or suggestions. We're always looking for ways to make these better. So I'll let you take it away, Mike.
Cool. While I get my presentation set up, how's everyone doing today? I don't really know. I can't see you, but hopefully you're doing well. Thumbs up and all that. And I'll be sharing my screen momentarily. And yeah, here we go. Oh, and I get to see people over here. Perfect. When I gave this presentation before, I didn't have the little sidebar of people's faces that I could see, but now I can actually see people, which is such a benefit. So hello, everyone. Welcome to Halloween Themes and Screams, where we're going to look into, as Caitlin said, the history of Halloween and also kind of the evolution of the holiday. So yeah, let's get into it. I guess a little bit of information on myself. I'm Mike Sturman. I'm a second-year construction engineering and management major from Cal Poly Pomona, and Halloween's been my favorite holiday for years and years. So I've actually taken a lot of time into looking into research for this holiday and finding out where it truly came from. I also used to be a Boy Scout. Well, I'm Eagle Scout, so I'm always a Boy Scout. But with my troop, I actually ran a haunted house for 5 years. So I have this very interesting perspective on how haunts operate. I've also been to Knott's Scary Farm and Universal Studios Orlando. So, or not Orlando, Universal Studios Hollywood Halloween Horror Nights. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. So let's look into why Halloween is such a fascinating and enjoyable holiday that's beloved by many. And we're going to do that by looking into the origins of Halloween. Where did it come from? And we're going to look mainly into its Celtic and Christian roots, because those are some of the strongest areas of where it came from. Then we're going to look at a bit more of a modern scope of Halloween and look into some interesting statistics about the industry as a whole. And finally, we're going to look into the history of haunts and also figuring out why we as humans enjoy the spooky season. So let's get started with a quote from The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, you've probably wondered where holidays come from. If you hadn't, I'd say it's time you begun. So let's go back, really far back to about 10th century Ireland. This is where the Celts were. And the Celtic people, they were very superstitious. They had many beliefs. And around the time of October 31st, they had this festival called Samhain. This was a festival that kind of was like a New Year's celebration to them, and it marked the end of summer and the beginning of a darker, more sinister winter. Now, this festival has many similarities to the modern day Halloween that we see today. For example, it has many themes due to the harvest. Around October 31st, you have lots of plants that are ready to be harvested and eaten. So lots of food being eaten during that time. Then they also had lots of rowdy celebrations. The Celts were a bit of a party people. They enjoyed drinking, they enjoyed sex, they enjoyed just going at it for nights on end. Sounds a bit like some college students that I know. But they would do this, and it was a very enjoyable celebration, which was kind of a highlight for this darker undertone that it sometimes represented. And this was reflected in their fearful supernatural beliefs. As I said, they're very supernatural believing people, and they had these strong beliefs in dark fairies that would actually kidnap people and bring them to the other world. Now, in order to prevent this, they had to wear costumes. And this is one of the first origins of wearing costumes around this Halloween time. So the dark fairies wouldn't take you away into the other world, not the underworld. So this festival, as you see, has many similarities to modern Halloween. But Halloween's complicated. It's been around for a long time, or at least the idea of this darker holiday. So there's been many influences. And the other major influence was the Christian influence. Christianity, it's been around for a while, and we all know that they like to expand their network of influence and get people to join the church. Well, the Celtic people were kind of in this sphere of influence. And as the Christians expanded, they wanted to get the Celts into their group. But the Celts were pretty satisfied with their festival. If you remember, partying, drinking, whole lot of fun. So the Christians had to be a little bit sneaky about it. And they actually rearranged some of their holidays, such as All Souls Day, to be at October 31st. So they could have a holiday during the same time as the old Celtic holidays. So joining the church would be easier and switching religions. But even still, it was hard for some of the Celtics to make a transfer, along with some other groups as well, like the Greeks. So they even changed the look of some of their figures. Like we all know the devil, right? The devil with the horns and the tail with the little prongs on it. Well, it's believed that that devil image that we know and love today, or hate today, or are scared of today, that actually originated from many of the Greek and Celtic gods that had these large horns and tails and many of those elements. And they wanted to kind of demonize it by making it the devil. So that's a very interesting way of looking how it went into there. But of course, they didn't take all these ideas of the Halloween holiday. They also incorporated some of their own. For example, there's a lot of symbolism with death. For example, on All Souls Day, that's when the dead come back to Earth to celebrate or to visit the living. And they would come back to Earth on this hollow tide. That sounds a lot like Halloween, and that's one of the original roots of the word, the hollow tide of the dead coming back to the Earth. Another cool thing that kind of originated from Christianity was trick-or-treating. Now, there's this thing called purgatory where people have to wait in when they're waiting to go to heaven or hell, and it's like this waiting room. And it was believed at the time that if you were to get more prayers to the people in purgatory, they could exit sooner. So poorer people would go around to the rich homes and ask for soul cakes. And this activity was called souling. And in exchange for a soul cake, they would pray for the loved ones in purgatory to make it go faster. And this eventually evolved into trick-or-treating, which is pretty darn cool. So we all know about death, right? And especially in the medieval times, there was a lot of deaths, from the bubonic plague to, the French Revolution. So there was this public fascination of death. And Halloween was one of those vessels that made death a bit easier to approach. So that's kind of how the holiday lasted and was able to stick around, because it was one of the few times where it's like, oh, time to appreciate the dead people. So let's jump forward a little bit and figure out how Halloween came to America. The Great Irish Potato Famine in the 1800s, that caused a lot of Irish immigrants to immigrate to America. And because of that, they brought a lot of their Irish folk stories. So if we remember many slides back now, the Celts, they were in Ireland. And although the Celtic religions were pretty much all but gone, the stories of the Celtic people, they were still there, and they remembered their heritage, and they brought that to America with them. So these Irish traditions kind of started taking off in America. And eventually the middle class were to start to grow, and this intrigue with Halloween also grew with it. There were some other factors. For example, in England, the Queen had a fascination with Halloween at the time. I believe it was Queen Victoria I, if I'm remembering correctly. And she went to a Halloween party, and all these reporters went there and were like, hey, look, she's into something spooky and Halloweeny. You should too. And people in America just ate that up, and it became a public thing that people enjoyed with large bonfires and social gatherings. So that's kind of how Halloween became popular. And you can imagine it just kind of tumbled and tumbled. But we'll get into that a little bit more when we look into the history of haunts. But we're going to look at Halloween in a more modern scope now. It's a more rockin' scope. But yeah, let's jump into it. Halloween is celebrated worldwide. We already know it's worldwide because it started in Ireland, and then it kind of went over to America. But then it really became big in America, and it exploded, and it became the industry we know today. And it's gone to various parts of the world, such as Catalonia, Sweden, and Slovenia, where it's celebrated there. And it's celebrated in many different ways. Everyone has their own activity or a tradition that they enjoy. Whether it's a pumpkin regatta, which is a real thing you can search up online, where people carve out massive pumpkins and race them as boats. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a fun 10-minute watch on YouTube if you have the time. But people also enjoy pumpkin patches and Halloween haunts. So there's tons of activities you can enjoy during Halloween time. But one of the best known things that's associated with Halloween is pumpkins and pumpkin spice. Can anyone remember another time of year that isn't fall when you enjoy pumpkins? See any hands up there? No. Because we don't really enjoy pumpkins outside of the fall season. Pumpkin spice is pretty much exclusive for this season. So if we look into how many pumpkins are grown every year, we know how many pumpkins are consumed during the fall season because that's just when they're eaten. So fortunately for us, the handy dandy USDA has been collecting data on how many pumpkins are grown in the US. And because I enjoy our audience participation, are there any guesses for how many pounds of pumpkins are grown in the US annually? Just a ballpark guess. No? No one out there? Not even gonna try to toss a number?
I think Benton said at least 2.
At least 2? Okay.
He said more than 10.
That's a very safe answer. You're a little bit under because there are over 1 billion pounds of pumpkins grown in the United States, with the majority of that being grown in Illinois. And now all these pumpkins aren't going to be carved and turned into jack-o'-lanterns. For example, most of the 700 million pounds to 500 million pounds grown in Illinois, that's mainly converted into pumpkin puree for all of your delicacies of pumpkin. But that's a lot of pumpkins for people to enjoy. That's a lot of pumpkins. This is just a small fraction. So we can't actually just look at pumpkins to see how popular Halloween is. It shows how popular pumpkins are during the fall season. But we can look at Halloween stores. I'm sure we've all been to a Spirit Halloween, or at least we've been to a Target that has a Halloween section in it. And if you've noticed, there's lots of specialized Halloween merchandise, whether it's the candy, the lights, perhaps even a fog machine. You can get very specialized Halloween stuff just for the holiday of Halloween. So we can actually look at the data from how much people are willing to spend on Halloween in retail stores. And the National Retail Federation, which is an organization that has represented the retail industry for over a century, they've been collecting data on Halloween since 2005. We have a couple charts we're going to look at here. This first one showing the overall expected spending on Halloween, or for Halloween since 2005. In 2005, it started off at a measly $3.3 billion in retail stores alone. But it's grown, and it's been growing for a while now, and it actually peaked in 2017 at $9.1 billion of total expected spendings. That's pretty cool. Now, as expected, it's COVID-19 right now. We're probably not going to be spending as much money on Halloween. It's still expected to be $8 billion. That is absolutely amazing. But another cool graph we can look at is this chart that shows the per person expected spending on Halloween. And this is even showing how popular it can be or how popular it has become over the years. People are willing to spend more and more money on it. And the NRF is actually expecting people to spend more than they ever have on Halloween ever. So almost $100 per person if they're going to be spending on Halloween. So that kind of just shows you how important it is to the industry. And there actually has been industries that have popped up relating to the holiday. For example, one of the biggest industries would be haunted attractions. Now, raise your hand, a few people who are here, raise your hand if you've ever been to a haunted house or a haunted attraction. Yes, most of us. I'm sure that's why we all decided to come. Well, I'm sure we've had a very enjoyable time there and we like them a lot. So let's figure out where they came from because it's a very fascinating story. So let's go back. And something that's affiliated with Halloween is pranking, right? We've all heard of the teepee in the house. Well, believe it or not, way back in time when Halloween was first becoming a thing in America, there were still pranking. There were still young boys going around the town causing havoc. And that havoc grew and grew until it was like, oh my goodness, they're actually taking apart fence gates and dislocating them and destroying public property and like creating big fires. It was a problem. So in order to distract these young boys in most cases from causing havoc amongst communities, youth groups such as the Boy Scouts of America and the YMCA and also church groups, they set up activities for people to do during Halloween. One of these activities could have been the haunt. So with these haunts and these planned activities, such as haunts and trick-or-treating and parties that were all supervised to make sure no mischief was happening, Halloween really started being viewed as this big holiday where the community would come together. So before we get on with the more history of the haunts, we have to talk about one of the best haunted attractions ever, and that is the Haunted Mansion. Raise your hand if you love the Haunted Mansion. Yeah, it's an absolutely amazing attraction. And it's pretty much the best Halloween attraction, at least in my opinion, ever created. It has such a great balance of that spooky atmosphere that keeps you on edge and using those Halloween tropes that we see, while also successfully applying humorous gags throughout the attraction that makes it absolutely amazing. But the Haunted Mansion wasn't only significant for being an amazing attraction, it was also one of the first times people saw uh, new technology and high quality props being put into a haunted attraction. Prior to this, all of these small haunts, they've been mainly, oh, we have some cardboard cutouts of a monster, ooh, or cloth, spiderweb, ah, or oh, here's a sheet, a bed sheet with some holes cut out, you're a ghost. Now Disney decided to invest in a large plane of glass with animatronic figures behind it to project ghosts onto it. That is such a high step up in quality. So Haunted Mansion is very significant to the attraction and actually inspired many people into making haunts because it's beloved by many. So going back towards a historical sense, in the 70s, people got scared for many reasons, such as, okay, people got scared of trick-or-treating for many reasons. For example, there were lots of scares of razor blades and candies or poison candies. So all these parents were like, hey, we don't want our kids trick-or-treating. It's dangerous. So, as corporate America does, they set up locations for kids to trick or treat. And these hard-ticketed events at malls and zoos and other public spaces, they started popping up all around for people to enjoy Halloween. So this was kind of where the start of these hard-ticketed Halloween events came about. But the start of having a more sinister event was with Sinister Seymour. Raise your hand if you know who Sinister Seymour is. Yeah, I didn't think so. He's an old Hollywood actor, mainly known for his stuff in Los Angeles, and he was called Larry Vincent, and his alter ego was Sinister Seymour. And his big thing was kind of being, I almost see his job as like a CinemaSins type guy, if you know the YouTube channel CinemaSins, where he would review Halloween horror movies live in front of audiences. And he had a cable channel network that was very popular. And Sinister Seymour, he loved his community and he had lots of fans that wanted to see him. So he enjoyed hosting these live events. And one year he reached out to Knott's Berry Farm and said, hey, could I have my event at your place? And Knott's had recently built a large theater that could accommodate this. And after a little bit of a struggle with the board board of Knott saying, maybe not, but then the old Walter Knott, who was the father, who was the original founder of Knott's Berry Farm, he said, I want a Halloween party here. It went through, and it was a very successful event. It went on for 3 nights with the showing of Sinister Seymour's Halloween Haunt, and people absolutely loved it. They would come in and they'd pay $4 to $4.50 for the event, and they would get to enjoy Knott's Berry Farm at night, as well as a show by Sinister Seymour. And as I said, it was very successful. And because of this success, they brought it back year after year after year, and the event grew and grew and grew. And because of that, Knott's Berry Farm was kind of the first amusement park that we have seen hosting these haunted festivals in their parks. And they innovated a whole lot of things. For example, they were one of the first people, probably the first people, to have a ride layover during Halloween time. They took their mine train and they put actors in there along with they put actors in there along with spooky decorations. They also did that with their log flume ride. So there's rides. They also kind of innovated haunted mazes. They were the first people to call them a maze that you'd go through. And they put scare actors in there, and it was extraordinarily frightening for people. And they also innovated the scare zone. If you've ever been to Knott's Berry Farm, you know they have these things called peek-ins. And they're pretty much a window where you can peek inside and see what's going on in there. And during Knott's Scary Farm, they would put live actors in there. Short story short, a key was misplaced and an actor couldn't go into his peek-in. So he was told to just go roaming around Ghost Town, which is the land in Knott's Berry Farm, and scare people. And he did that. And he did it in a very aggressive way. And some of the talent people at Knott's, they saw this and they're like, hey, this is extremely successful. People are getting really scared by these guys roaming through the streets. So the next night, all the beacons were locked, and all the actors were out in the streets scaring people in a very sinister way. Now, in the past, there had been monsters roaming around, but they weren't mean. They were Dracula doing signatures and photo ops. But this was the first time where the monsters would really get in your face and be aggressive. And people absolutely loved it. They'd come in droves and absolutely loved the event. So there's this place called Universal Studios, I don't know if you've heard of it, that also want to get in on this. Universal Orlando opened, and it kind of opened facing some financial struggles. It wasn't as big as a success as they hoped. So during the lacking fall season when attendance was down, they wanted to put on the event. Partially because they needed the attendance, partially because they saw the success of Knott's, they decided to create a Halloween festival called Universal Fright Fest, which would later be called Universal's Halloween Horror Nights, HHN. And in this first festival, people would see lots of entertainment. They had live bands, they had performers, they had all these sorts of entertainment that people would enjoy. They also had a large haunted house that was put in the queue space of Jaws the Ride. It was called the Dungeon of Terror. They also had scare zones with chainsaws that would chase after you, or chainsaw actors that chase after you. So this was all at the first place. And a big draw was that people could actually enjoy Universal Studios rides at nighttime. So that's actually a big draw for a lot of these events, is this nighttime experience on rides. But just like Knott's Berry Farm, people enjoyed getting scared at these Halloween festivals, and it was a huge success. And just like the other parks, it grew and grew and grew every year. And they even started advertising the event all the way back in, I think, April. So this is a huge source of revenue for these parks, especially during the slower fall season. So if we're looking at the industry now, we can see how large it is. According to scarefactor.com, there are over 2,000 haunts. These are professional haunts in the United States. This isn't even counting the non-professional ones like the one I used to run. So it is a very successful business to go into. So what makes them so appealing? A couple weeks ago, I had a conversation with scare designer Ted Doherty, and he's designed for a plethora of scary attractions, haunted attractions. He's designed for Knott's Scary Farm, Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights, LA Haunted Hayride, and so many more. And he believes, and I believe this as well, that one of the strongest reasons why people enjoy Halloween so much is because of escapism. It's the one time of year where you get to be who you want to be. But also on that same foot of escapism, it's the one time of year where you can go into these worlds of horror and experience a very pure emotion that is very scary. And for the people who enjoy it, it's a very healthy scream. I don't know about you, but the moment I get out of a scare maze, I feel so great because I've just survived various entities trying to murder me for the last 5 to 10 minutes. You don't get that on California Screaming. You know, it's a roller coaster. But in a scare maze, you have these actors jumping out and lurching at you, and you're able to go into these horror films and feel something. And as a result, many people have become huge fans of this. And there have been communities that have formed and an industry that's formed out of it, and they have their own conventions. For example, if we look at Transworld, Halloween attraction and show, that's where a lot of the companies will debut their props and whatnot. So if you've seen the animatronics at Spirit Halloween, a lot of that's debuted there, as well as much higher end props. So that's a very cool convention. And in LA, there's Midsummer Scream, which happens in the middle of summer because we can't just wait for Halloween, which I totally agree with. And it's a large base of community haunters coming together. And now with professional hunters coming together and sharing their knowledge. So these communities are formed, and it is absolutely amazing. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why Halloween, as well as haunts, is so successful. It's because of this idea of community that you don't get with other holidays. Halloween is the one social holiday out there. You're not going to go around door to door asking for gravy on Thanksgiving. That's just not going to happen. But in Halloween, you're going out, or at least maybe not this year as much, but usually you'd go out, you go trick-or-treating, you go to community events and see what's going on. And people always can't wait to see what's going to be happening next year in the community. And I can 100% confirm that. When I ran a haunted house, we had people coming back every single year excited to see what we had in store. Believe me, we were not the best haunt. We were a group of Boy Scouts ages 11 to 18 trying to scare people. We were 15 minutes away from Scream Zone, which is a very professional haunt where you can get totally scared. But people still came to us, and a lot of people came to us because we were a community staple. We were a community event that happened every year where people could check in, see their neighbor, see what was going on, and enjoy themselves. So Halloween this year, it still can be fun, despite COVID and whatnot. You can still go online and enjoy these virtual events. Maybe go to a store and get some candy and snack all night while watching a horror film. But now, hopefully, now that we know a little bit about the origins of Halloween, where it came from, all that, and we also know kind of about a more larger scope of the industry, as well as why we like it so much, hopefully we can combine that all together and have a rockin' Halloween this year and really enjoy this ourselves. So remember, everyone, happy Halloween.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Does anyone have any questions for Mike about his knowledge or experience?
I've got one question.
Oh, Jake's got one. Hold on 1 second. What's up?
Hello, Jake.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, the mics are really good in these. This is like a Notre Dame classroom. But besides the point, my question is, right, like you talked a little bit about how the origins of Halloween come from not America, right? And how America has really like built this up. What does Halloween look like in, other countries or cultures around the world now? Like, like in modern days, like if you were to go over to Paris, France, per se, how different is their Halloween experience? I don't know that you know, but.
I don't quite know, but I believe it actually is a very similar reflection to what we see in America, because it is kind of like an American export that goes out to all these other places. But a lot of the haunts that you see, especially, they're very location based. For example, there's a haunt in London called the London Tombs, which takes you literally through a tomb in London. So it's taking a lot of the history that you find in these locations, and especially in Europe, they have a lot of history there. So they can kind of twist the holiday to what they see fit. I also just saw a fact about this. I haven't done much checkup on it, but I believe in either Greenland or Iceland, they don't celebrate Halloween, but they celebrate another holiday that's very similar to it, where they still dress up in costumes. So there's a lot of variations. And even like Dia de los Muertos, it's celebrated around Halloween, but it's not Halloween. It's its own separate holiday. So there's a lot of core themes that you find around this time of year, especially with death and revisiting and confronting that you can find through pretty much almost worldwide. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But if you want to look into like Halloween in Paris, I don't know how popular it is in France, but I'm sure they have a few events and it'd be cool to look into.
So you would say like America is probably like the leading, like culturally. Gotcha.
Yeah, they exploded it.
I also have a quick question. So TEA and ND just got invited to possibly participate in a haunted house. And I was wondering, like, I can't imagine like actually effectively scaring someone. Do you know, like, do you have any recommendations for like what seems to be make a good scare actor and a good experience for people?
So scaring is very much an art, and it's a very difficult thing to do. I've scared many a person in my life, and there's lots of strategies that you can do, but a lot of it is about your environment. So are you in an environment where you can scare someone? And any environment can be made to scare someone. Like sometimes I just pull pranks on my friends, and literally as they walked in through a door of a classroom, I just say their name loudly, and that would scare them. But usually in a haunted house, you are in a very prime environment. So you have a lot of these corridors that are twisting left and right. You have an eerie soundtrack. So people are already hiding out of their nerves. And really, all it takes is a good jump, something they're not expecting to get them. There's a strategy in scaring where you kind of have diverted attentions. So let's say you have someone, I have this mug over here, if it decides to show itself. you have a mug over here that's like, oh, I'm fading in and out of the back room. That's scary. That's scary. Ooh, look at me. And then, ah! You know, I jump up and scare you. You were looking at the mug. You weren't looking at me. So that's diverted attention. And then you steal it back with a large jump. And then you can go back and forth and ping pong people, which is fun. But it's kind of just taking that expectation of what you think is going to happen and then having that not happen instead, and have something very scary happening instead. So, you know, loud noises always help, but also sometimes more subtle, creepy things. Like if I just stare at you, that can be very creepy to some people, and especially in person. That can just send someone on the floor, even though you're really not doing much at all. So really, you have to find what works best for you, what works best for your environment, and what works best for your audience.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? You can post them in the chat if like you have a bad connection or something. No, all good. All right, well, thank you, Mike, for sharing with us all your knowledge, and I learned a lot about Halloween, so that was very interesting and entertaining.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. You all put up such a great thing, and I'm happy that I can be one of the people spreading knowledge around, especially during these kind of times.
Your presentation is beautiful.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
You knew it
Thank
so
you.
well, too, like, this is all images. Oh, those transitions, Shannon said.
I love my transitions. They're fun. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. And if you ever want to reach out to me, you can follow me on my Instagram, Mike Disneyman. Feel free to DM me anytime. I'm friendly. I'm around.
All right, very cool. Well, here, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but thank you all for coming and joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week because we skipped last week in order to move it to this week. So we will be having one next week, and then we'll go back to the every other week. So, all right. Have a good night, guys.
Bye.